Hey everybody. Today I had a really good time going out and taking a walk in the cemetery, and I came back and was just thinking about how symbolic nature is. You go out, and some people don't even think about all the mythological stories that we get from nature. The trees, the birds, you know, um, the pagans, and also the shamans knew that there was a certain spiritual world out there that was hidden within nature. And I was just thinking to myself about a Joseph Campbell quote that goes something like this: "The cave that you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." And I think to myself, we all have our personal caves that we have to enter that we fear. But once we enter them, then we come out changed and transformed. And usually I think about that when it comes down to adversity and trials. And it just makes me wonder what other mythological archetypes there are that are transformative. There's the cave, but you also have the mountain that you have to climb. And then once you get to the top, you can see the horizon, you can see the world from a greater perspective. But then you have to climb down, you have to descend. And it just kind of makes me think of some of these other stories that we've read about in literature and in the Bible. Jacob's ladder, um, angels descending and ascending up to heaven. Uh, and also another uh, aspect of something biblical in nature is Jesus when he goes out into the desert and he's tempted by Lucifer, the adversary. And he's given like three temptations. I'll have to go back to read what those three temptations were, but I think the last one was pretty much expressing his power, fall so you can have angels rescue you, and then people see you as the savior, and something to that effect. But the point is that Jesus went out in the desert, and there seems to be these archetypes and these motifs that continue to reoccur where the hero has to journey out in a state of solitude. He has to go out to the forbidden forest. He has to go out to the cave. He has to go out to the desert. And it's an aspect of transformation to be able to go out and take the solitary path to understand yourself and know who you are. And I feel like that's been the case for me in my journey with my mental health. For as scary and frightening as psychosis is, where you break away from reality, and it almost feels like this dream world parallel reality that you live in that no one else can perceive. And I think it's has something to do with spiritual archetypes, and whether it's the symbols or the images or the numbers that keep reoccurring, synchronicities that happen when you perceive something in an altered state of consciousness. And that's something that I think should be studied more when it comes down to the cross reference between having a psychedelic altered state of consciousness and having a psychosis, because I think there are certain parallels involved. Because you can go through the state of emotional trauma, sometimes paranoia, but then you can also have these transformative moments where you see patterns and geometry, and everything is viewed with divinity and significance in a person's life. And yeah, I was just thinking about that today. Um, oh, this video is probably only like 4 minutes long, but trying to think of what other sort of revelations came to me while I've been writing my story. Um, I got to see Dune. That was actually probably what made me think about some of the well-known mythological stories of ancient times. Um, just seeing that movie, Hans Zimmer's score. with the beautiful, almost Middle Eastern desert music. Um, and it just made me think of those biblical stories. Um, Obviously, Paul isn't a savior. He's but he does go through a certain initiation process throughout the course of the movie. He has an inheritance and a life. Spoilers, so don't continue on. But pretty much, he loses his family and has to go and pretty much restore his father in a spiritual manner. And that's kind of how I saw the movie. And of course, I haven't read the book. I know things get darker as the book progresses, but I just kind of saw the archetypes there when I was watching the movie. Carl Jung talks about them. I just got the book written by Carl Jung, the Red Book. He talks about sort of the dream state, the state of the unconscious, and he seemed to be very fixated on golden scarabs. And what's significant about golden scarabs is that they're a sign of rebirth. They're also a sign of death, but it's a cycle. And it seems like these symbolic archetypes and these magical symbolisms are seem to reoccur in stories. You know, take something like Harry Potter with the magical wand, and when you think about it, there's always been magical wands in mythology. You know, one of the first well-known ones is Mercury with his caduceus staff, or according to the Greeks, that was Hermes, and others in Egypt, that was Thoth, and he was the god of dreams. He was the god of writing and language and magic. And I've just been utilizing that archetype while I've been writing my story, and it's been pretty exciting. But yeah, I've just been thinking about these archetypes and these symbols within these stories and how prevalent and important they are. You know, I feel like in my personal life, um, going through psychosis was the cave that I feared, but the treasure within was something that I found within myself, discovering that there's a whole nother spiritual realm out there that we're not aware of, you know? And I think when a person goes through a real psychosis, it can be spiritually transformative or it can be self-destructive. It can go either way. Now, I wouldn't condone one to go to those states or seek them out, but sometimes the brain naturally wants to go to a state where it breaks down and falls apart, and then it builds itself back up. You know, you hear that phrase of tearing something down just to build something back up. You know, they do that in the military, and I think that's in some ways one form of initiation, right? But I think in our culture, I've noticed that we've lost that state of initiation where, you know, a man and a woman have that chapter or that threshold where they pass through, where they're tested. And of course, you have things like graduating high school and getting a job, but I don't think those are necessarily true forms of initiation that are spiritually transformative. I think we need something more on a mythological scale that feeds our inner soul, because our inner soul desires to hear a good story, to be able to be transported to other worlds and places. Whether we read a good book or watch a good movie, we see heroes like Luke Skywalker, where he goes into the cave and faces himself and is fighting Darth Vader, and then it turns out he's fighting himself, and it's a very symbolic gesture that some of the greatest struggles that we have and the adversities come from within us. But I also think that within us we have the strength, the perseverance, the virtue, and the truth that we can share and offer to other people when we go through a state of crisis. We can return back from that state of adversity and say, I made it out, I survived, and this is what I learned from it. And, I think in some ways it creates someone who has better wisdom about the world and the experiences involved in it. But I also think that it's almost a state of not only transformation, but it's a healing process. Because when you go through a state of psychosis, you're going through all your past trauma. All your past trauma resurfaces, and either you can have persecutory thoughts, or you have, on the opposite spectrum, thoughts of spiritual enlightenment, where you feel like everything is connected, everything has a pattern, and everything is divine. God is within you and God is without, above you and below you. He's everywhere and all around us. And I think we sometimes don't see the world that way. We see it in sort of a mundane and routine kind of lifestyle. And so, but I think that there are, if we look at the world on more of a spiritual spectrum, it can be very transformative. It can be very magical. For me, reading books like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter kind of opened my eyes to a whole new world of possibilities that could be reached through the imagination. And it's just exciting where I'm at right now, where I'm writing my story. Sometimes I have writer's block, and then other times I have these sporadic insights of symbolic patterns and intuitions that I get to see when I'm writing out my story, and realizing like, oh, I'm discovering something about myself while I'm writing this story. So it's pretty exciting. But anyways, I just wanted to share that, guys, with you about how I hope that we can all just be able to rediscover the hero's journey, be able to go on an adventure, go on a journey that could take us to greater heights of self-awareness and perception, and even come back with states of symbolism, and also visions, spiritual visions that can take us to places where we'll be able to understand ourselves more and understand the world around us, and be able to help be more compassionate and loving and understanding towards those around us who may be going through a similar state of adversity, that we can let them know that you're not alone. Whether you're in a state of depression or anxiety or fear, that just like Paul Atreides, you let the fear pass you, and you turn your inner eye, and you're the only one that remains. You're the only one that is able to stand the test of time and endure and persevere. And I hope that we can all just persevere and find the hero's journey within. Thank you.